Hello everyone, my name is Francesco Aletta and I am a researcher at the UCL Institute for Environmental Design and Engineering. I'm going to be presenting this work called Soundscape Assessment Towards a Validated Translation of Perceptual Attributes in Different Languages. It's a collaboration with a large number of partners and research institutions around the world. This presentation is being pre-recorded here in London in July, so greetings from the United Kingdom to wherever you are watching this video from. For those of you who are not necessarily familiar with the concept, soundscape studies are an emerging field of research, and this topic is gaining momentum both in academia and practice. And the main focus of soundscape research is that it is driven by how people perceive, experience, and understand acoustic environments. And this approach has recently started to gain momentum also in policy documents. As you can see here from a few examples, we have a technical report by the European Commission. The soundscape approach was then later also mentioned in Good Practice Guide on Quiet Areas published by the European Environment Association, and very recently in 2018 this new perception-driven approach was also implemented in the Noise and Soundscape Action Plan released by the Welsh government. Characterizing how sounds are perceived by people is one of the main goals of the soundscape approach, and for this process tools and scales that can consistently describe how perceived qualities of acoustic environments are necessary. Standardizing soundscape assessment is of course a challenging task in which researchers have put increasing efforts in recent years, and in 2008 the ISO, International Organization for Standardization, established a working group called Perceptual Assessment of Soundscape Quality to actually support theoretical and methodological harmonization in soundscape studies and practice. And this actually led to the publication of three standards documents so far. First one is ISO 12913 Part 1, published in 2014, dealing with the general soundscape framework and definitions. Part 2, published as technical specifications, ISO 12913 Part 2 in 2018, dealing with soundscape data collection methods. And finally, last December 2019, Part 3, technical specifications, again dealing with soundscape data analysis. As I said, Part 2 of the Soundscape Standards series aims to provide researchers and practitioners around the world with a reliable questionnaire for soundscape characterization. We are talking about protocols and scales that can describe perceptual attributes useful for assessing a soundscape. The ISO technical specification report protocols and attributes grounded in the soundscape literature, but the limitation is that it only includes an English version of the protocol. And for this reason, the main challenge is that the applicability and reliability of these attributes in non-English speaking regions has not been tested and validated, and in general, research investigating translations of soundscape attributes is quite limited. This figure is taken from the technical specifications, ISO technical specifications, and it shows the actual scales used for soundscape assessment. In general, people are presented with such scales, and then they have to state the level of agreement in order to assess their experience of the soundscape. So these are the 8 attributes that we will be focusing on in this study. So pleasant, chaotic, vibrant, uneventful, calm, annoying, eventful, and monotonous, which again are reported in method A, which is one of the alternatives of protocols proposed in the standard. Again, the main issue in soundscape studies is that these attributes are only available in English. So in order to address this gap, we established an informal international network with soundscape researchers from different regions of the world, and with relevant expertise and of course some geographical spread, so that for the moment we are covering 15 different languages other than English, and the general goal of this collaboration is validating these first 15 translations of the Soundscape attributes as reported in the ISO TS 12913 part 2, as well as validating actually a method for the translation procedure and its analysis, so that other languages can potentially be added in the future. So in this work we basically report the outcomes of the preliminary stage of the project, that is the provisional translations, and describe the next steps towards validation. So this is an overview of the current members of this collaboration, and we provisionally gave the name to the network as Soundscape Attributes Translation Project, SATP. The Soundscape Attributes Translation Project is mainly based on two stages, stage 1, stage 2. In stage 1 we aim for a provisional translation, so the different institutions have organized a qualitative data collection process and have proposed a first translation in their local language based on the English reference provided by the ISO. And then in stage 2 there will be a listening experiment carried out separately by all institutions in the local language with the version they have translated from stage 1 with the native speakers, using a common set of auditory stimuli and standardized equipments and procedure for calibration in order to validate and confirm such translations. Here you have an overview of the institutions involved in this project and their corresponding local language. The project is being coordinated in the UK by the Acoustics Group at the Institute for Environmental Design and Engineering, UCL. And the initial rationale for selecting the languages was about basically considering regions of the world where soundscape research is well established, and in general research groups are active in this discipline. So for the definition and labeling of the languages, we refer to the classification proposed in the ISO standard 639 part 3 published in 2007. And here you can see all the codes and universities and research institutions that are coordinating the project in the different regions. So languages are here reported in alphabetical order, and when there is a mismatch between the local language and the country of the coordinating institutions, this is probably due to a native speaker researcher for that specific language who's based in a different country. And when more institutions from the same or different countries are involved, this is due to the need of covering a language being spoken in different regions. So for example, French for Canada and France, Dutch for Belgium and the Netherlands, Chinese for mainland China and Singapore, and so on. The general goal of stage 1 was basically providing a provisional set of attributes in each local language that should be the best possible translation of the English reference list of Soundscape attributes. So for this purpose, a qualitative approach was adopted, aiming at the best guess, if you wish, and based on previous experience and knowledge of soundscape studies of the researchers involved. So each research partner defined their own data collection strategy independently, and in this table you can see a summary of the range of methods used, the number of people who were involved in stage 1, and also an estimation of the years of activity in soundscape research for the research partners group, and whether the proposed translation was actually informed by previous work published in soundscape literature or not. And you can see the references in the column on the right hand of the table, so for more details you can refer to the paper. In general, the guiding principle was that considering the reference data collection instrument, that is the 8 attributes: pleasant, annoying, eventful, uneventful, monotonous, exciting, calm, and chaotic, it was desirable to retain the meaning rather than pursuing a literal translation. Therefore, it was also agreed that if a single word would not be sufficient to render the original meaning, a set of 2-3 words would be allowed to translate as closely as possible the same perceptual construct. Most research partners relied on expert panels to draft the preliminary translation, and this basically consisted of an open, unstructured discussion among the local soundscape experts often starting with the forth and back translation of the ISO instrument, and then an iterative process of refining the set of attributes until consensus was reached. So some groups developed also a multi-stage process and piloted the proposed instrument with follow-up primary data collection like small-scale listening experiments or sound walks, and this happened more often for groups where previous references in literature were not available, so scoping stage was desirable in such cases. The next two slides present the outcomes of stage 1, where the proposed translations for the 15 languages are reported. And as you can see, almost every group opted to avoid a one-word translation of the English attributes and instead aimed for 2 or 3 words that would together convey more clearly the meaning of the perceptual construct of interest. To the best of our knowledge, the Soundscape Attributes Translation Project is the first systematic attempt to harmonize the translations of Soundscape assessment attributes in several languages at once. And the main challenge the research partners faced was indeed the possibility of translating each of the 8 attributes of the ISO document with a single word in a different language. And this turned out to be particularly difficult when considering the transition from an alphabetic to a logographic language system. So in this case, more terms were often necessary to retain the meaning. The general idea is that after the validation of the preliminary translation, the groups will then reassess whether it's possible to reduce the number of terms needed for each dimension, and whether any kind of revision of the protocol is needed. It's important to highlight that the Soundscape model from which the 8 attributes were originally derived, it was developed in Swedish and then translated into English. Because the research community is now using the English translation rather than the original Swedish version to translate the model into other languages, some error and uncertainty will already be in the current translation by default. Moreover, for the sake of standardization, it should be noted that the ISO typically works with 3 reference languages, English and French and Russian in some cases. So the overall goal of the SATP initiative is to confirm an English and French protocol first as reference, and then these 2 versions should be equivalent so that other researchers can rely on them as a basis for future translation. So for this purpose, it's also necessary to standardize the translation methodology. The 15 languages considered in this study so far would cover approximately 2.5 billion of native speakers around the world, that is almost 1/3 of the global population, and examples of languages that would help increasing this proportion would include, among others, for example, Standard Arabic, Hindi, Russian, Portuguese. So our network would welcome collaborators in these corresponding regions. And the recent update is that we have a new partner for the Greek translation of the protocol, the Technical University of Crete. So thank you very much for that, and in general the outcomes of this project will hopefully support the widespread adoption of Soundscape attributes both in academia and practice. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you are interested in joining this initiative, please do approach me via email or other channels. Thank you.